Trey Murphy in the building. Dunker Spot is always in the building. Guys, we got a lot to talk about. I just got back from MSG. We'll get to that. We'll get to the West. But let me ask you guys a question. The odds of this right now, the odds of the top three in the draft being Dallas, San Antonio, and Philadelphia in that order was 0.0114. What do you think this means for the lottery moving forward?
Ooh, Nekias, this feels like your type of vibe. Exactly your vibe.
It was a very, like, once you got past the shock of how the order actually shook out, I did see and hear a lot of conversations about what flattening the lottery odds really means and how difficult it is. Like, it's a tough balance for the league to try to strike because they obviously want to curb the T word if they can. And so you don't want the automatic, if you have the worst record, that you just get this pick. But flattening the odds has also led to situations like this, to where there have now been teams that were legitimately hurt or legitimately bad, and they're sliding in the lottery. And it's just like, well, how exactly do we, if we can't compete with like the LAs, whatever, in free agency, and now free agency has also changed because of the CBA, we also can't land a top 2 pick, even when we are bad enough to have those kind of odds. Obviously, there are good players all throughout the draft. Like, you can find all-stars, all-NBA caliber talents outside the top 3. But it's easier when you have the number 1 or number 2 overall pick. And if you're flattening odds and you can't guarantee either way, it's a lottery. But you get the general point. If you can't feel confident you're landing that high up, it becomes even more difficult to team build. And if you're at the bottom, it becomes a little easier to stay at the bottom. And so as far as what it means, at bare minimum, those conversations get louder about, hey, are these odd percentages correct? Even if we're going to continue to flatten it out so it's not top pick option has like a 25% chance, whatever, is there more tweaking that can be done to make it a little more quote unquote fair?
Trey, what do you think?
Yeah, it's weird because, like, on one hand, how do I say this without, like, see, this is like a touchy topic right here because I feel like I can't say too much. I got to dance around this, but on one hand, there's teams that purposely tanked, and obviously it did not go well for them. And so I guess the league kind of addressed that issue, but then there's other teams that did not purposely tank and were, struck with bad luck, like the injury bug, and they, didn't get punished, but it's just like, you go through a season of all those trials and tribulations and, losses, injuries, just all this, and you end up with the number 7. I mean, I'm not going to say a specific team actually, with a pick that you thought you were not gonna get, so it's tough to see that and then, realize like your season at one point was, all right, we're going to focus on the draft and this is what you got out of it. So, there's been great number 7 picks. I'm not going to act like there hasn't been, but, obviously everybody knows what was wanted during this draft.
Steve, what was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was, I can't believe Dallas jumps into the top 4 in the first 30 seconds of this. And then as things kept unfolding, I was looking at the top 4 and it's like, oh, it's Philly and Dallas and San Antonio and Charlotte. So I was just kind of stunned the whole way. I went for the thrill ride. I wonder how much of this is because of who's in this specific draft as opposed to if it was a different draft, because I believe, Atlanta jumped up last year, not to an absurd degree, but it was still that. So obviously some drafts, the stakes are going to be higher. I think that 3 of the top 4, as far as the odds go, just falling out of the top 4, it's kind of like hey, there's a chance, but you can't bank on this in the same way that you did. So yeah, you want to give yourself the best chance, but you can't just lock that in anymore. So you're gonna have to prepare and do the job to make sure whichever pick you get is gonna be the best for your team. And I think it gets tricky because free agency has changed, so the trade market is kind of the way to kind of do business these days. So does that pick have more value that way? I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of where I was at. I was just stunned.
Nekias, I'm curious your perspective on the team building, just for the team management front moving forward. I mean, my sort of takeaway on this, without naming specific teams or anything like that, is I can name Utah. I'll name Utah. I thought that Utah stopped playing on December 5th, and they were like, we want this. We want the number one pick. It didn't work out, and so Utah may pick a great player at that spot, so it may end up working out. They have great guys they have a great coach. They have great guys in the front office. It may end up working out for them. I think, and we've talked about this in the show a million times. We talked about with Trey, we talked about with Cam, we talked about with a bunch of guys. I don't think that mentality is good for the league. I think it's bad for the fans. I think it's bad for competition. And so I guess I'm curious from your perspective, is this going to basically, like, in theory, I mean, we don't want to make rash decisions on May 13th, but in theory, do you think this is going to change the way that teams approach this moving forward of like, hey, why don't we just put a competitive product out every night, whether or not we have the same amount of talent or injury luck or whatever it is as some of these other teams, rather than trying to game the system for these lottery balls just to, get cake thrown in your face on lottery night?
I don't know if we get a major shift on that front, honestly. Again, I think that's where some of the flattening of the lottery odds kicked in to begin with. And it's not like this is the first year this has been implemented. And this feels like the first time Utah has done this as early as they have.
Yeah.
And so teams are still going to be incentivized, to Steve's point, especially when it comes to specific draft classes, to try to get in there if they feel like they're not in a position to make the move to get into the upper echelon, or if they're not already there, et cetera. So I don't think you get a major shift on that front. If nothing else, it stinks for Utah, for using that as an example. Hey, if I'm San Antonio, Dallas, who had Derrick Rose level odds when Chicago won it that year, it's okay, well, you can get the luck either way. So I don't know if this is going to be enough to completely shift it.
Yeah. Steve, do you have any sort, before we get to the game last night, do you have any sort of final thoughts?
Well, I'd also add, we had some teams that were down there that probably weren't supposed to be down there. And I wonder how much that shifted things. That's going to happen from year to year, but bad injury luck threw some teams into some seasons that they didn't necessarily expect. So yeah. I don't know if I would bank on this specifically happening this year, because some of these teams, non-Utah division, just you could see there was a difference talent-wise. So
yeah,
that's probably my last thing I'd add.
On MSG last night, first of all, Jayson has not got his MRI back yet. I think we all want to send our best wishes to him and best luck to him on that. He's a great guy. He's good friend of Trey's. We've done a bunch of stuff with him on the show. So I'm just sort of all wishing for the best there. Trey, what was your thought? I talked to you right after the game. What was your thought on the Knicks in general, and just the comeback kids at this point? Because the third quarter was sort of like what they've been doing this entire playoffs.
Yeah, I think we saw how powerful of an offense they have as well, because they matched Boston's heavy hits with more heavy hits, as well as Jalen Brunson. He was just phenomenal. He's been really, really good this entire playoff series. Just his time as a Knick in general, he's been very good. And, he showed that in that third quarter when him and Jayson Tatum were just going back and forth. And it was just I remember just watching the game, I'm just damn, all these shots, the shot making in that game was incredible. And then Mikal also played really big for them as well. And I think that's the thing with Boston, they needed somebody else to, really step in and, help, withstand Jalen and Mikal, hooping. And then OG hit a big shot as well at the end of in the fourth quarter as well. So, it's tough because, what people are taking out of that game is, Jayson Tatum getting hurt, and then, hopefully it's not as bad as what it looked like, but it's just, I'm sure it's the air out of the garden. And, it's just sad because, he's such a great player, and you never want anything like that to happen to anybody. So, prayers up for him as well.
Can we talk about Mikal's mid-range for a second? Can you explain, and we're a little biased, obviously, on this show, but can you explain the degree of difficulty of getting that shot off consistently over a guy like Kristaps and the percentage he shoots it at?
He shoot it all the way up here. So when he shoot it above his head, he already 6'7". You're not getting to that shot. And that was something that that's something that he actually talked to me about when he first got to Brooklyn. He was talking about how, the biggest things that he saw towards the end of his tenure in Phoenix, those times when Book was hurt, he was I just got to find a way to get to my spot, because I'll be able to shoot over anybody. So when he got to Brooklyn, he worked on just getting to his spots, like in the mid-range, being able to shoot over people. And so now when he's with the Knicks and he doesn't have to do that every single possession, he saves it and he brings it out when necessary. And they needed it for him, at the end of the game and, in the third quarter and the fourth quarter as well.
How important is that for a player to be able to get to their spots? Because I feel like people don't necessarily understand how key that is, because people will be like, ooh, that's a bad shot. And it's like, no, I'm kind of trying to set this up. If I can get to my spot and hit this, that sets up my drive and everything else.
It just separates people because, I think the biggest thing in the NBA is probably shot creation, and you see that in the playoffs. And so if a player works on getting to a certain spot and he knows the defender's not going to block it, at that point it's really just about if he's making or missing it. Like that's really it. Because people are too good, and offense always is going to be great. Like great offense is always going to be great defense. Like it's not baseball. So you have to figure out a way to just get to your spot and get to a place where that the defender's not going to be able to stop you from getting there. And I'm going to be able to hit this shot. So it's super important. It separates guys from being good and being great players.
Who do you think, besides the obvious, you look at as the best at just that particular skill?
Other than the obvious of Katie, that's what you were trying to say, babe?
Yeah, other than the obvious of the 10-time All-Stars and MVPs, and it's like, Shea can get to his spot. Like who are the people who you look at as just like they can do this all night long?
Tony Stick Nembhard really, I know he's going to get to that mid-range. It. And he gets to it, he's going to bump you. And it don't really matter. It doesn't really matter what you are doing as a defender. He's going to bump you. I mean, I know it's a little different because with layups and stuff like that, and then short jumpers, but I feel like he really does a good job of getting to where he wants to on the court.
Nekias, what do you think about the game last night?
Oh boy. Well, outside of the cloud to kind of end it was an interesting battle for me. And Steve and I were watching the game yesterday, and I tossed the question to him again. I was like, hey, how do you feel about New York's offense right now? Because I guess zooming out from the series, what's kind of stood out, the Knicks have been able to have these massive comebacks in the fourth and they win, but it's kind of taken them a while to get going, and they ultimately haven't been able to bend Boston's defense consistently. And getting to the end of the game four, it honestly just did not matter. It felt like as Boston was physical off ball and as they were leaning to the switching, Jalen Brunson was still just able to score at will. Felt like there was still a lot of space for him. Boston clearly didn't want to put two on the ball against Jalen Brunson and open up catch and shoot threes or open up cuts and stuff like that. And ultimately, if you have a star level guard that can just take that and say, okay, fine, if you're going to give me this space and give me these one-on-ones, conceptually it makes sense. Let's limit these catch and shoot opportunities, but I'm still really good and you're giving me a bunch of space. And so watching Jalen Brunson kind of cycle through Derek White, random drive against Drew Holiday, if he sees a big good look, there was a possession, I think, in the third quarter, he ended up missing the shot. New York goes double drag pretty much with an empty side. He gets to the right side. Kristaps is guarding the second screener, and it's just dropped for him. And it's a pull-up for Jalen Brunson. He misses. I'm just like, hey, man, these are a lot of comfortable looks for someone who's really good. So, I had these thoughts in the back of my head, how much are they really bending Boston's shell, or how much are they breaking that shell? But if the shot making is going to be this is kind of what the Knicks need. And something that we talked about heading into the series was pathway for New York, defend well enough, make sure this game's close in the fourth. Jalen Brunson can then do his thing. And as we have seen multiple times in this series at this point, once Jalen Brunson hits the fourth quarter, you're just not going to be able to guard him. Boston may have to consider sitting some doubles at some point just to make someone else beat them. I wonder if that's a minor tweak that we see in game 5. But the Knicks have done they did a really good job in that game 4. Jalen Brunson specifically saying, okay, if it's going to be 1-on-1 or 2-on-2, if they're going ball screens, we just have to punish them. And they did.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the things in the playoffs is we talk a lot about schemes and adjustments. Sometimes it's just beating your matchup and making the plays at the right time. And we've seen that in other series before, like Jimmy against Milwaukee, where it doesn't actually matter who's guarding me. I'm going to make these plays and we're going to consistently score. I thought that third quarter where the Knicks just kept scoring and Jalen Brunson attacks Al, Cat attacks Al. Now they're getting stops on the other end. Now they can, you talk about their tempo in the half court. Well, we can just get up quicker. And now we can just get you not in a set defense. We can kind of play out of that. And with Jalen Brunson scoring 14 in a quarter, that becomes the hub. Well, now, okay, we can kind of get what we want and how we want to get to it. It was interesting, though, because that first half, Boston, once again, kind of did all the things they needed to do as far as, hey, we're going to make these threes. We're going to move the ball. The drives are back on the table. You got to guard us. And so the Knicks just kind of consistently staying around, which they've always done this whole series where, okay, we get a bucket here. We get a couple stops here. You're not going to separate all the way. Then you talk about the fourth. Like, I hate that injury happened. But the Knicks had kind of put this game right back in that different box. So all the things that Boston did good defensively, how much does it matter in the fourth? Like, it's Jalen Brunson time. It's cat time. And now we're kind of able to defend in a different way. Mikal Bridges hitting big shots. OG hitting shots. Like, they become a different team in that fourth. And especially when you're that close to getting that win number 3 and win number 4, you just play a different way.
I wanted to move on to the 2 games, guys, tonight. I want to get your sort of initial thoughts. Let's start with Trey. We'll start with you. We'll start on Denver OKC, which feels very unpredictable, I would say. And your sort of initial thoughts as we approach, this pivotal game 5.
And first off, I feel like I have to comment on how ugly that last game was in the sense of just shooting percentages. Like, I can't lie, I'm a scorer. So I'm looking at the offensive side of the ball.
He's hot.
Obviously, I value defense, but like, dog, I'm looking at this right now. Denver shot 31% from the field and 24% from 3. OKC shot 35% from the field and 24% from 3. That is atrocious. That's bad. That's really bad. And I saw a stat, and it was Brett Usher. Shout out to Brett Usher.
Yeah, shout out to Brett
Usher. He posted like, who was it? I want to say it was Pacers Pistons, I want to say. Like 2002. I think it was like 2002. They had a game where it was like 64-66, like playoff game. And it was almost identical to the day that what's it called, OKC and Denver had their game 4, where they shot, and it was like the worst shooting percentage since that game. So it was in the same day from 2002, and they shot awful, terribly. Like, this was atrocious.
It was, not to cut you off, Trey, it was Celtics Pistons.
Sorry.
They were 4 for 39 from 3.
That's insane. That is insane. That is bad. And then another thing I'll say too is with this series, what people I feel like haven't really been saying much of is how bad or just not up to par or up to standard Nikola Jokic has been playing. And I think that's, it's weird because the series is 2-2 and Jokic has not played anything like Jokic. And you know that OKC is a buzzsaw. They're a really good team. And so Denver's been able to stick around with OKC, and, they've had control of a lot of these games without Jokic being who he is. So I think this next game is just really like a big, I really don't know what's going to happen. Like, it's a really big toss up on, if OKC comes out and they pull another game 2 performance, or Denver comes out and they're just withstanding runs and, just waiting till the end, and then Aaron Gordon hitting threes to, help them win games.
What do you guys think?
Ooh, man. Well, first, to bounce off of what Trey said about that first quarter, I think I ended up tweeting out, hey, no more jumpers into the second quarter. At like the 8-minute mark of the first. I was like, okay, we just need to, I felt for him because you're playing at altitude is like a 36 or 38 hour turnover from an overtime game that was also insane. And so it's like, okay, I kind of get it from the physical standpoint. Like, there probably isn't an easy game to get the juices flowing for. Like, obviously, from a competitive standpoint, they're ready to go. It's an important playoff game, but all those jumpers were short. I'm just like, okay, they're just not here yet. Can't wait for this to warm up. But as far as general thoughts heading into this one, I'm curious to see what OKC's offense looks like structurally. Because with Denver shifting to zone, one, they've just played more zone in every game of the series. Looked it up this morning, I think 57% of OKC's offensive possessions were against zone in game 4. Which is up from 20% in game 3, which is up from 12% in game 2. It's been a wild kind of shift on that front from Denver. And OKC has tried a little bit of everything. Let's get Shea off the ball and have him flash to the middle, and Denver just collapses 2 or 3 different dudes to make sure he doesn't get a look. Let's have Shea initiate. Let's get Alex Caruso, someone to screen the top of it, and Denver's just kind of there. Let's flash a big to the middle. Let's see if we can set up a high-low. And Aaron Gordon is just parked in the paint. It just does not care. And so, like, watching OKC try to figure out what lineup combinations work, what kind of spacing alignments they want to get to, has been an interesting battle for me. And I'm curious to see now, after seeing that much zone from Zimmer, do they now have answers? Because they just got that huge dose of it. Like, what was the film study like there? And if OKC is able to open things up offensively, like, where does Denver pivot to? Because they've done a little bit of everything in the series to kind of keep OKC off balance and out of rhythm. And that's where you get to, as Trey mentioned, close fourth quarter. Now it's just Murray and Jokic time. And we just trust our guys to execute more than we trust OKC's guys to execute. If OKC opens it up, is that it?
Well, yeah. I think that's why losing that game was huge for Denver, because you did a lot of defense things. I know it was an ugly game, but we had you in a box, and you got to find a way to pull the one out. Because I think one of the interesting things to me in that fourth was Denver was in the zone. Alex Caruso came in and said, you know what, Big, you stay down there. I'm going to screen any one of these two people up here, and we're going to figure this out real quick. And they were able to get some help, get a drive kick. They got Denver out of the zone and got Jokic in pick and roll, and Shea's able to split and get a layup. I thought that was one of the biggest plays of the game. Like, oh, because if you take zone off the table, you know, Denver's whole thing is we have to find enough defensive versatility to just kind of get us where we need to get to. And then in the fourth, we're going to be who we are. And so I'm intrigued to see, is to say Shea plays better game, Jalen Williams plays better game. We kind of hit you at the start, and now we're off to the races. Or is Denver able to kind of keep them in this box of maybe we're taking too many quick shots, maybe we're thinking a little bit too much, maybe we're trying to over-penetrate, maybe we're not looking to penetrate the score. Kind of just a weird moments where OKC becomes less of a machine. And does Jokic decide what type of shots he wants? You know, because OKC's trusted their size on his post-ups. They're going to try and help late. Is he going to try and get to the middle of the floor? You know, if it's pick and roll and OKC helps, he's going to catch, give it a beat, and then look to attack. So I'm intrigued to see, how does Jokic kind of refine it? Because he's been so good for so long, you're kind of just not used to 7 for 22. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not necessarily what he does. It's your favorite word, Nekias. Efficiency.
With the air quotes?
Absolutely. 1,000%.
Unbelievable.
It's hard. Anyways, can he kind of find those moments and make those shots? You know, I always say he's a bucket getter, but the bleep you threes aren't falling this series for a whole bunch. So now how does he kind of keep that pressure on him? It feels like a series with a bunch of buttons where if one team hits this, oh, it's a wrap.
Trey, is the answer to in your opinion, is the answer to the zone as simple as just making more shots?
Yes.
Cool. Before we wrap, quickly, we should hit the other game tonight. Cleveland Indy. Pretty crazy game 4 for a bunch of reasons. Trey, what are you looking for tonight? What do you think just Cleveland has to do from a pure kind of morale standpoint to get themselves back in this? Oh no, he's scratching his face.
Uh-oh.
It's not looking good right now. Like, I'm not going to count him out, but it's just not looking great. I mean, Don, questionable for tonight, so that's not good. Or did he get upgraded? I don't know for sure if he did. Last time I heard, he was questionable.
He's playing, though. He's playing for sure.
Yes, but at the end of the day, if you're questionable, then it's like they're already going into it with not a great mindset. Like, it's already like not a great mindset of, all right, he has his ankle thing. Like, it's gonna be a story if he plays bad, and it's like, all right, it's on his ankle. Like, and it's not even really Don, in my opinion. Like, everybody else just doesn't seem like they're playing like they really want to like play together, or like they're just out of sorts. Like, it just seems like they've just been really out of sorts. And so that game 2 was the most important game because they had a chance to, not make the home court advantage like so bad. Like, they were up 8. No, they were up 114 to 119 with 46 seconds left. You cannot lose that game. Cannot lose that game. And when they lost that game, it put a damper on the rest of the series. It's like, I don't know how many more games they can win, because if you play a game like this, Don has 48 and you still lose, what hope do you really have?
Well, I'm curious your guys' thought. I mean, how much is, you talk about out of sorts, how much of this is just Indy? This is just them. It's almost soul-sucking in a way, and they did this to Milwaukee as well, where Gary Trent goes absolutely nuts, and all of a sudden you look up and the Pacers win. And it's like I feel like this is just what this team does.
Yeah, I think Indiana they've just been relentless in this series, in this postseason, in the calendar year of 2025. I got to update the stat at some point. What is it now? 41-16 in 2025?
Nekias was early on this. You were early on this.
It's
early.
It was early. You started like February 10th. You started just updating the tracker.
This has been a dunker spot bit. It was like, hey, this weird start to the Pacers season, but I'm not going to leave Steve out of that one. But in all seriousness, they just keep pressure on you. And the fact that Cleveland went to, the big zone in game 3, the 3-2 zone with Evan Mobley at the top, and then Indiana dinged it immediately in game 4. It's like, that's problematic because the switching hasn't really worked. They haven't wanted to put 2 on the ball because when they have, like statistically, it hasn't been very good for Indy's offense, but the quality of looks have been there. That's very much we are missing the open shots that we are generating whenever you try to blitz us or whatever. Switches got dinged very early in the series. Like, that's more of my concern. Cleveland hasn't really found anything consistently to bother Indiana, and they just keep going. Like, I think there's a world in which we get to the game tonight and Darius Garland hits pull-ups and gets drives. We get a more aggressive Evan Mobley. If Mitchell plays, I would imagine he does. Like, he could still just have a good a good pull-up game. He hasn't been 100% this entire postseason, and he still had like 48 earlier in the series. So, like, the offense can play better. They haven't really found a solution they're comfortable with defensively. And unless that shifts in a real way, that's where I'm kind of with Trey. Like, they could very well win game 5. But in terms of flipping the series and coming back from 3-1, that's not going to happen unless they find something they're comfortable with defensively.
One game at a time. I wasn't proud of one game at a time. We gotta defend. We gotta find something. Mix in switches. They can't be at the level, but they've got to just move things around the board because you're not going to take things away from Indiana. You just have to get them in a sort of just out of rhythm, out of sorts, out of making their automatic reads, which is what the zone did, which is why the zone worked. Indiana couldn't necessarily get to their automatics. You saw in game 4, they were ready for the zone and knew exactly what they wanted to do to distort it and make the matchups different. And then now we're in pick and roll. We're flowing. Tyrese making plays. They're dribbling, driving, kick, punishing you at all the times. We know what Indiana does. So if you're Cleveland, you just got to find a way to attack. You got to score. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I'm not trying to take Trey's gimmick, but like they've got to score the ball. I think one of the hardest parts for Cleveland was Indiana was pressuring the ball and they told their guards, fight over every screen, big help if needed, but the weak side is going to be in and we're going to take pick and roll off the table. And as much as Indiana was punching them on offense, Cleveland just was not punching back on the other end. So they are supposed to have the offense to kind of give their defense enough wiggle room to swing a little bit with Indiana. We've only seen that in one game. 2 particularly, the one they lost in game 2. But outside of that, when they haven't been able to make buckets, Indiana's been able to go 8-2 run. You know what I mean? 10-2 run. So now we're looking at 18-12 to 18, then back and forth. That's not where you want to be with Indiana. And also, very quickly, this Nekias stat. Nekias didn't talk about the Indiana Pacers for 3 whole months because they couldn't guard anybody. I'm not letting you off the hook.
Also, we had very brief discussions about Indiana because the defense didn't look great, and Tyrese is also working back from injury and things. There's a whole lot of what's going on
Drew,
here.
No Nembhard, and no Nesmith.
That was also true.
That's a big thing. Those are 2 big losses. I feel like.
I love the singular side eye.
Guys,
check the tapes.
Guys, before we wrap, Trey's got to go work on that shoulder of his. Before we wrap, just get one person you're looking for tonight you think is going to have a big impact. Either game. Nekias, you start.
We'll fight back with Steve a little bit. Do we get another Aaron Wiggins game for OKC?
He was huge.
Steve, your thoughts?
My selection is going to be James Johnson because if he gets minutes again, that means the Pacers have won.
I'll watch what you say about James Johnson, sir.
I'm away.
Steve's like, cut that.
No.
I mean, the guys took my pick once again. Dunker spot got taking my picks for players I think are going to do well, but Let me look again on these teams. We'll say for Cleveland to have a chance, we'll say Darius Garland. Darius Garland has to have a big game for them to have a chance in order to try to push this series. Just try to keep kicking the can. That's the biggest way they can try to keep kicking this can and try to get to 7 is if Darius Garland plays really, really well. Him and Evan Mobley, I'm going to do a 2-piece because, yeah.
You picked 2 All-Stars. Great.
That need to play better. That's all it is.
Okay. All right. Love it. Trey, Steve, Nekias, thank you guys as always. We will see you next week.
Appreciate y'all.